Hello, fellow witches. Thanks so much for tuning into the Modern Witches podcast. It means so much to have your ears here and your spirits here with us as we explore the many ways the witch shows up in our world. I am popping on here to remind folks that the Witches Confluence is just around the corner. This year, the Witches Confluence is dedicated to spiritual activism as a way to fortify our spirits for the transformation that is demanded of us. The Witches Confluence is taking place both online and in person, with online workshops happening from October 27th through the 30th, plus featuring recordings from our in-person confluence that's taking place on November 2nd in San Francisco at the San Francisco County Fair Building in Golden Gate Park. Our in-person Witches Confluence features a keynote presentation from Jessica Lenyadu, who will be talking about energetic boundaries in times of chaos and offering space for Q&A. All of these events are really designed to help us get through what is going to be and already has been a deeply challenging and transformative moment in our collective evolution. And spiritual activism is not a replacement for the real work we do in the world around political organizing and protesting and activist activities, but it is designed to support us in maintaining resilience and maintaining our resource during these times when so much is demanded of us. So please check out our offerings. Head to modernwitches.org and see the Confluence lineup of incredible workshops. And we'll see you either online or in circle. Blessed be. Hello and welcome to the Modern Witches podcast. This is our digital altar space where we commune and explore the many multifaceted ways of the witch and how they show up in our world. And today I'm very excited to be talking to Rachel Howe of Small Spells. A witch, an astrologer, a ceramicist, artist, writer, so many things. And I'm just really excited to have you here, and I'll invite you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be talking with you and sharing with everybody. So I have my brand is Small Spells, my alter ego. And I do too many things. So I do tarot reading. I created my own tarot deck, astrology. I feel like mainly I'm sort of like a writer, illustrator, a lot to do with like the esoteric spaces. I also do hand poke tattoos. I also do ceramics. Juggling a lot of different things, but there's threads between all of them.
I can't believe I didn't name your tarot deck as like the first thing, especially because that's how we connected. I feel like in the world. Such an awesome deck.
Thank you.
And Rachel is also a contributor to our upcoming anthology, A Confluence of Witches. And their essay is titled, "You're Reading Everyone Around You All the Time, Learning Energetic Boundaries with the Self and Others for Readers, Healers, and Witches," which is such an important topic.
Yes.
No, I was just saying maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I feel like that's up for a lot of people right now. So yeah, I guess, and I want to talk about that maybe in the context of like you and your journey of like learning about your intuitive gifts and connecting with them. So, when did you start to tune into that and maybe find tarot too?
Yeah. So my kind of, I guess, more public journey started like a little over a decade ago, which is when I started learning tarot and astrology and offering that to other people. But and this is why the sort of boundaries and ethics thing is important to me. ever since I was a child, I was very open, and my experience was that I was kind of intuiting a lot of things without any sort of structure or framework for me to make sense of all of it. My family was not religious in any way, like very great ethical people, but not super spiritual. So that whole sort of connection to things that are under the surface, or things that are felt, or things that are kind of beyond day to day, there wasn't any sort of structure for me to kind of understand this whole like interior kind of like universe that I was really tuned into, and then also tuning into other people. I've when I was younger, I had really, really vivid like dream world, and would feel presences, and was just very attuned to stuff that I couldn't understand or make sense of or explain. And because I didn't have any sort of framework, I think what it did is it really confused me, and it really kind of gave me like teenage depression. And so a lot of my personal journey that comes out in my work is just really learning how to understand and validate all of those felt sensations that carry a lot of wisdom, that if you're not sort of brought up in a way where that is normalized, or that is something to sort of learn and master, I just felt very lost. And when I did finally start learning these different modalities, things really opened up for me, where like things that felt blocked were suddenly open. I felt more connected to myself. Just all of this kind of opening happened. And it was just sort of like, once I started learning these other esoteric languages, it was like, oh, everything makes sense now. Like all the stuff that I was so confused about my entire life all just makes sense now. And learning like tools and ways to understand and use all of that was really valuable to me. But along the way, a lot of the learning happens through experience, and learning the language, and then learning the boundaries sort of comes afterwards. So it became clear to me that the idea of sort of energetic boundaries is a really vital piece to all the other like really cool stuff that you can access when you're feeling really empowered in your intuition. It felt like there's sort of a bit of a void there. So I started holding workshops, and then I wrote a little zine about it, and then the piece for the anthology kind of grew out of that. And yeah, I think it's something that is really needed, and a lot of people, whether they're readers and healers themselves or not, a lot of people pick up the witch ethics zine and are like, oh wow, this is like important for people to be talking about, or this is like some meaty stuff that's like necessary.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, yeah, whether or not you're on the beginnings of your witch journey, or you kind of have another like layer of psychic unfolding, it can be really confusing. Just like the experiences you're experiencing and not having context, or not really understanding like the layers of information. Yeah, and having a vessel like tarot or astrology sort of gives you the language you need in order to process it and integrate it. And I think there are a lot of people out there who aren't tuned into the woo language, if you want to call it that, or the spiritual realm, who are also deeply sensitive. that they, you know, maybe they turn to like psychology too for
Mhm.
language around it. Um, but even, you know, in your day to day, like not having boundaries, it causes so much disruption.
Yeah. 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 I mean, so much of it is applicable to everybody in just normal interpersonal relationships. A big part of it too, I feel like, is your relationship with yourself and the idea of like having boundaries with yourself, or even the idea of having boundaries of when you are um, spiritually connecting. You know, I think there's a lot of, and these are all just things I think we just need to have more consideration about. Like, I never want to judge or shame people and be like, you're making mistakes, you're doing it wrong, because we all make mistakes and we all do it wrong. And that's just a part of the process. Um, and I think, you know, that's the whole gift of spiritual connection, is this like general support and unconditional love. And I think adding a lot of critique and judgment to it can really take away that healing aspect. So, you know, not to judge, but even just for myself, you know, it's like when I um, sit down, you know, I think a lot of us think of like we connect um, to whatever we're connecting to on a spiritual level. Oftentimes we're asking for something, or, you know, we're asking for help, or we're asking to receive something. And I think being really clear on, um, you know, who are you asking? Um, what what is the exchange going to be? How are you going to honor what you're asking for, um, so that it's not kind of this taking or extracting that we're really used to doing in regular life.
Yes.
There's so much
Mm-hmm.
extraction that we do to each other, but really, really considering, and also the idea of like having boundaries around what is my responsibility to kind of do on my own, and then what is going to work better if I do collaborate with spirit on it, you know, and not uh, kind of knowing your uh, how do I want to say this? Knowing what's on your plate to take care of, because it's going to help you grow, and then being able to um, intuit when spirit wants to help you, or when spirit wants to be involved, when it's like in balance for that to happen. You know, I think there's just in the sort of general world, when we think of connecting, maybe we think of like prayer. And a lot of times when we're praying, we're asking for help, and um, not thinking of spirit as like this like buffet and like what's there for me to take, but really thinking of it as a relationship. And so, um, you know, how am I going to show up for this relationship when I'm asking spirit to show up for me?
Right. I think the word you use that really struck me is like the collaboration,
Yeah.
that I think oftentimes we don't fully accept or, you know, participate in the
Mm-hmm.
collaborative approach with spirit. Um, and I've noticed, like, even for me in my own process, it's like when I'm not um, fully attuning to the needs of the spiritual guides that I'm working with and collaborating with, that's when my spells are less potent, or
Mm-hmm.
things don't come to fruition in the way that I had intended. Um, and I think there's a way in which we get really caught up in like the humanness of our
Mm-hmm.
experience,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and forget to like really be in a very human relationship with spirit, and a spiritual
Yeah.
relationship with spirit as well. But um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I was thinking, I was kind of writing some notes about you know, what are all my different definitions of what a witch is. And
Yeah.
one thing is that I was writing, and I see that I mentioned this in the anthology piece as well, is that one way that a witch is sort of defined as this someone who can like sort of shape reality. And then I was kind of sitting with that, and I was like, well, how is that different? Like, how does a witch do that in a way that's different than like, you know, these very powerful billionaires that we have now who are really shaping reality in negative ways? You know, what, like, you could call them a witch because they're using their will and their intention to really shape reality. And I think the difference is that the considerations or the needs that the witch is taking into consideration is beyond just their own. So whether that's their community or, you know, nature or spirit, because if you're tuning into spirit, oftentimes the thing that is going to help you best is also going to help others. Like there's pretty much never a time when I have felt blessed or gifted with something in a way where it really only benefited me. You know, it's like I get blessings that it involves more people than just me. So I think it's sort of that understanding that when, as you're shaping reality or as you're receiving, if it does only benefit you, then it is not actually in collaboration with spirit. And when you are really in collaboration, it's going to be really beneficial on like a much broader level. And I think that's the difference of this sort of like egomaniacal, super, super powerful people that we have now. They are not witches or wizards because it's just for their own benefit.
Yeah,
And they're not in tune with spirit if that's the case, you know.
totally. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's such a good juxtaposition to make. Um, yeah, I do feel like there is, if you look back in historical records of witches, you know, those have been people who um, have been wielding their magic to look at the expense of their families or their communities. You know, they're the people who are midwives. They are the people who do spells and hexes for other people. And they're like kind of balancing levers of power in that way. So it's really interesting to think about it. Are there any other ways that you've been thinking about or defining witch that feel right for you?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, you know, I'm just speaking about my own sort of like identification as a witch. I am not, if I identify as that, I'm a solitary witch. I'm not in a coven. I don't practice witchcraft like traditionally, I guess, but I do 100% consider myself a witch as uh just a part of who I am, and because of how I see the world and because of how I respond to the world and because of, you know, my worldview aligns with the worldview of Wicca, but I don't practice it traditionally. But so I do think a lot about like my sort of um, conceptualization of a witch. And for me, a lot of it has to do with the ways that you use your intuition and the ways that you use your connection to things that are sort of beyond what's on the surface. And relating back to what you were saying, one of the ways I think is being able to not just see realities that do contradict like the systems that are in place or the status quo or something. It's like it's this ability and willingness to see it because it contradicts. So it's like not accepting systems or dynamics of power just because they exist. It's being able to tune into things that do directly contradict it. And I think that's why traditionally witches have been so persecuted. It's not just misogyny, and it's not just classist ideas, and it's not just like all of those things. It is that a witch knows that there is a reality that is not the status quo and believes in that reality. And if they were given power, they would be able to enact that reality or bring it into being. And I think that that's why traditionally, like, the people that are in power, it's become so urgent that witches are persecuted and repressed,
Yeah, I really love that definition, because I think, the billionaires are a symptom of this, but, capitalism required a whole different paradigm in order to like take hold of everyone's like time and imagination. And I feel like witches during the witch hunts were persecuted so much because they were in defiant resistance to that paradigm, the capitalist paradigm, the exploitative paradigm that has ultimately won over. But it does feel like even there's just like a baseline understanding of like, this isn't it. This can't be it.
Yeah, this can't be it. And I think because, witches are able to connect to a spiritual reality that is different, that does feel different, having that access is sort of like really gives, it's not just saying like, I feel like there could be another way, like this doesn't feel good, this is oppressive or exploitative. It's like literally being able to connect to and know how it feels to be in a different system that is supportive. And that just gives so much power to the person. I also wrote something recently where like I think the other threat of traditionally of witches, because especially when it was just people who were like herbalists or midwives or people who like were basically practicing medicine, that it's like if you can sort of intuit which herb is going to help someone, you're really that someone otherwise would have to pay or get access to that information. So basically you can access information that would otherwise be gatekept or withheld, so that not everybody is empowered. That is a real threat as well, that having access to knowledge that can kind of circumvent the walls that the powers that be put up to keep people from accessing knowledge. I think that's like a huge threat. And I think that's something that even now modern witches can use as their power, the more that you sort of trust your intuition and trust that spiritual connection can offer knowledge and wisdom outside of the structures that keep a lot of people from accessing it. I think that's still very powerful today. It's a powerful tool for the witch today.
Yeah, I think it seems to be a thread I've been thinking about a lot as we talk about how we're in this period where, like, fingers crossed, an empire is dying in the United States. And so what does that mean? That means that, we as communities need to sort of like pool our resources and understand who has what skills and really start to be thinking in that sort of like network approach of like who has these skills, and how can we honor these various roles that are deeply important and may not look like what they've looked like in this like old system that's dying out.
Yeah. And I think it's like building trust in yourself and building trust with other people, having trust in other people, in your community members. When people are withheld from knowledge by structures to keep them oppressed, what it also does is it's kind of presenting that person who doesn't have access as not trustworthy. So it's like thinking about, who is naming people as people that we can trust, because I want to trust all my neighbors because they're humans and we're living in proximity to each other, and there's just sort of this ingrained level of support that we're able to give each other just by living in proximity to each other. But if I'm not in my like witch mindset, I might be like, oh, well, I don't know what they do for work. I don't know like what they're about. I don't know if I can trust them. Whereas my witch mindset is like, well, if I talk to them while I'm walking my dog every day and I get a good feeling, then I like them and I respect them, that's all I need. I can trust them.
Right.
Whereas like other systems want us to not trust each other, unless
So
there's
true.
all these. I mean, it goes back to the I forget what the title is, the witches and midwives, the little book that
Yes, witches, nurses and midwives, I think.
Yeah, which is just, it's like that book just like blew my mind, because it's just like laying out how like women were the medical professionals, women were the midwives. Makes total sense to have women treating other women for this like women specific
Part of,
part of
healthcare,
healthcare. And then when it's like just it just happens across all lines, but when the medical profession became professionalized, it was all men, and women were literally not allowed to attend medical school. So it's just like, this is why we don't, it's taken us a long time to have a lot of women doctors, for us to trust women doctors. It's because literally the structures were like, if you practice this without being professional, we will persecute you as a witch. But we also won't let you practice it as a professional.
Right.
And
because so many women were taking their
reproductive health into their own
and
control.
also like I guess men and the patriarchy would see it as their production of labor, right? Like women produce more laborers. And having women be in control of that production of labor was like not acceptable to them. Which is really sadistic and terrible, but this is the legacy we live. There's so much history in that. And I also like want to bring it back to the boundaries piece, because I think people get tripped up too when, I think from a psychological lens, maybe more than spiritually, maybe both, we get drilled into this like boundaries are so important, boundary work. And that can leave people feeling or maybe enacting boundaries that are like super rigid and unbending or overly protective. That does limit their ability to like connect with their neighbor and build trust and community. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, or any like ideas about how to manage that, I guess.
Definitely, because that was part of my sort of past history is that I was not, I didn't know how to put boundaries in place when I was younger. That, I mean, I think for a lot of us, it's like not it's a more recent conversation. But I think just the particulars of how I grew up, it was a bit, the idea of like putting intentional boundaries that work for you into place, like just wasn't a skill that I learned. And so my sort of reaction was that I really closed off I really put armor on and I really closed off. And in doing so, I really closed off to myself. And so I had the experience of very much having those like really, really solid walls up as my boundaries that did not work. It wasn't helpful. It didn't allow me to connect with like other people, with myself. And again, it wasn't until I started like learning these modalities and getting more in touch with myself that I was able to like break down those walls and then learn what is needed specifically for me, even specifically like day to day, it's like being able to have these flexible, um, like I can't remember if it was a therapist or somebody told me like, when you're thinking of your boundaries, you don't want to be thinking of putting up a wall. You want it to be like made out of mesh, you want it to be something where things can pass through. Maybe it can change, it can be flexible, but it's the whole idea of boundaries is not just a blanket, all-encompassing wall. It's that you get to choose what do you need at a given time to feel safe, and that can change, that should change over time also as we grow, like your comfort zone can grow, and so therefore your boundaries can grow. And I definitely think boundaries need to be flexible and malleable. They need to allow movement. It's almost like I think the boundary that we need to put in place in order to put up the healthy boundaries is that I'm allowed to choose based on what I need. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, because we tend to want to people please or give people what they expect from us rather than being like, oh, today I feel like this, so I'm going to support myself in this way. Tomorrow I might feel drastically different, and my support that I give myself might look really different. And maybe that inconsistency on a surface level may be hard for other people to deal with, but I think there's ways to do it with integrity and with consistency that like it can become irrelevant, because also ideally that other person is focusing on their needs and what they need, and being able to enact their own boundaries and express their needs.
It's also, oh,
No, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, so important for witches and femme people who also might have been trained in the society to be of service or like defer their needs in the favor of others, So I really like how you frame that, like, what are your needs? And then like building boundaries based on those.
Yeah.
Centering.
And it's centering your perspective. I think that, I mean, that is where I find the identity of a witch as really feels really good and supportive, is that I feel like at the root of it, it's like, you know best, and not in a chaotic way and not in a destructive way, but in a really just like supportive way. Like each person knows themselves best. They know what they need. If they can sit with themselves long enough, they can find the answer to whatever questions they have. If you know, it's like everything that we need is held inside each of us. And if we can each be like embodying it and interacting with like all of us as being our best self and interacting with each other as their best self, it's like everything works and everything is good and supportive and not harmful. And I think because of that, just witchcraft as a whole has this real, and all, you know, that's the thing with like all these esoteric tools is like, it's a bit of like, well, there's no rules, or it's very vague and open. And I think that can frustrate some people, or that's the excuse to devalidate it, is that it's very open, but it has to be open because it's to honor every specific person and their like unique makeup. It has to be very open. So I feel like the basic tenets of witchcraft are just basically like, I'm real, nature's real, we can interact, and that's it, you know? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to me, like, I feel like when I was first learning about witchcraft, there's something that's so liberating about it, right?
mhm,
Because there's no dogma or hierarchy, there's no liturgy. Like,
mhm,
it's just, it does feel like a path or like a way of life.
mhm.
Um, yeah, would you consider yourself like an animist? Is that part of your practice?
I think in some ways, yes. I doubt nature has been a really big like conduit for spirit for me. Like
Mm.
I really, I, you know, I feel a lot when I'm in nature. Feel a lot of presence. And yeah, I think you know, this cycle of destruction of nature feels as serious to me as the destruction of humanity. You know, it's,
Mhm.
I think definitely I feel like the things that ground me are like or the things that I turn to: myself, nature, and spirit. And often nature is a pathway um, to spirit, 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
And can I ask like how your art practice fits into your
mhm.
spiritual practice? Like what is
Yeah,
that
so
dynamic like for you?
um, my specific art style that I'm kind of known for, the way it looks, it really came out of from when I was first starting to do hand poke tattoos. And because hand poke tattoos take longer, it's like primarily outline, it's these really simplified sort of minimal forms. That's like the sort of surface reason of why they look the way that they do. But when I'm actually drawing, I do, and writing, the the ones that sort of feel the best or work the best, I do feel like I'm in some sort of collaboration with spirit. Like it feels like my writing and my illustration work best when I sort of, yes, tune into myself and my own interests, but I leave a lot of space to sort of like invite other ideas to collaborate with me.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, I mean, sometimes when I'm writing, I'm like, this is just coming out, you know, and the same with like drawing. Like sometimes it's just like, this comes out complete, you know, through me, but from somewhere else. The tarot deck was very much channeled, and I really um, devoted a lot of time and energy towards making the tarot deck so that I could be in that sort of channeling space.
Mm.
And I could tell right away when I drew something and it wasn't, you know, a channel. I with with stuff that I'm making, it's that was a very special time in my life where I sort of could devote kind of all of my attention to a project, which is hard to do now. But yeah, I definitely want, when I'm doing creative work, I definitely want to be sort of tuning into, I don't really define it as anything, but like whatever is sort of available to me to sort of bring in. I have, sometimes I do work that is, I have an idea for a little zine that is like more sort of literally a collaboration with spirit, because I've had times when it's like coming in more directly. I'm not going to share it because I want to save it for the zine, but the spirit told me a joke that was like, it's just really funny.
I love that.
And that's going to like show up in some project, but
cool.
Yeah, I think there's like a definite sort of like voice or feeling that I feel is not me, but it's me connected to something, that I think just feels really right when it comes out in either writing or illustration.
Yeah, that resonates for me, in the way I organize my own practice. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I think those types of channeled experiences take a lot of space, which I've just been noticing recently as like life gets more full. It's like, oh, how do I protect these spaces, right? These special spaces where this can happen and flow.
Yes, it does get really hard. Yeah, it gets super hard. Somehow it's like, I feel like the like days used to be longer somehow, or like I don't know where all the time goes, but yeah, it's like when you're able to devote like your full attention, but in a relaxed way where you're not like forcing it or putting pressure. I feel like really special things can come out, and it feels really good because there's this confidence that's kind of like comes out with whatever the content is. There's like this added feeling of like, oh, this just feels right, or like I have lots of self-doubt, but there's a lot of times when I'm creating where I'm like, I don't have self-doubt because it's this, it's like me plus something else that I feel really sure of. That's a nice feeling.
Yeah. I've been asking all of the witches who are tarot witches a question about the strength year. How are you feeling about this year as strength year?
So the strength card, for me personally, the strength card tends to come up when I am sort of at the end of my rope and I'm just sort of like, I don't know what else to do. And like, I really need help. And then like strength card will pop up and it's very frustrating because it's basically saying like, yeah, there's no big solution. There's not like, oh, here's the answer of like what you can do to turn things around or make things better. It's like, no, it's just these small things that will eventually add up to a shift or a change. Like I think it's like a nice card, but I feel like when it comes up, a lot of times the message feels very like, I'm not going to give you what you need or want right now. I'm going to just be like, sorry, just keep chipping away,
Yeah. Yeah. I totally see that.
It's like I feel like it acknowledges that things are hard, so it's sort of like if you were to sort of tune in spiritually about this year, I feel like it would be like, yeah, you know, like shit's weird and
Shit's totally weird. Yeah.
it sucks and it's hard, but like, you know, it's such a different energy from like the tower or something where it's like, oh yeah, like you know, everything's gonna burn down and we'll rebuild. It's like, no, this isn't that. This is just it, and it's not keep doing what you're doing. It's like keep doing each day, but like try harder or have more intention or be more spiritually present, which is basically like um figure out how to help yourself and not freak out when like that's maybe what you're doing or you want to do. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like uh I don't I find a lot of I feel like I receive and I find a lot of humor in spirit. But to me, the strength card is like when someone tells you to calm down. So
Yeah.
it's like, and not that it's like, I do feel positive about the strength card, but it's a little bit of like, you know, it's like you're freaking out and you want someone to be like, yeah, this is really bad. And instead they're like, calm down. And it's like, and like you probably do need to calm down, you know,
Right.
or that if you find ways to calm yourself down, like things will get better. But
That
yeah,
feels
the
so
strength,
accurate though for this year.
yeah, yeah. Well, that, you know, it's like things have been so bonkers in these kind of like really extremely disturbing and infuriating ways, all the way to like these ridiculous ways. And it's just all so upside down that it's like we do get to a point where it's like, well, if I just look at the news every day and freak out every single day, you know, what is that really doing? You know, or do I work on cultivating what I want to cultivate, which is not ignoring the news, but it's like cultivating maybe the alternative to
Mm-hmm.
all the crazy stuff happening. It's like just working on that cultivation, which does involve um, healing, like, you know, because it's the woman taming the lion. So it's sort of like what it does involve is sort of not going so deep into our reactions, but staying on our path of cultivating what we want to cultivate while at the same time sort of managing our emotions. That's why I feel like it's this like really frustrating, like calm down, because it's like acknowledging like you're really emotional, but it's sort of saying the way that we move forward kind of requires that we each learn how to manage our emotions because that will be the most constructive thing. That will also be the most caring thing to ourselves and to others.
And
Um,
sustainable.
yeah, and sustainable. Yeah, yeah,
I almost think that like, you know, the oppressors of this world are like wanting us to be in this like anxiety loop because
yeah,
it's so much easier to like knock us down
yeah.
when we aren't rooted and resourced. So
Right, right. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's a huge point to make is like, you know, we're seeing it in Gaza that like literally like you can have everything taken away from you and your capacity to give care and support to other people does not have to diminish.
right.
And it's like, so when we're told or we're given the message of like, if you don't have enough money or you don't have enough success or you're not hot enough or whatever, you don't have as many followers, you like you said, you're unresourced. You can't help yourself. You can't have a good life. You can't help other people. And it's like, that's fully not true.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of the resource that we have that the world needs is just caring for other people and being able to support those around us and being able to like hold space for people and allow them to figure things out and allow them to thrive and, just to literally just to not do harm to other people. Like,
Yeah.
it's a way of, it's a resource that you have that you can enact that helps other people, is just like, don't be an asshole. But yeah, it's preferable that we are all feeling insecure and like we don't have anything, we don't have any power, we don't have any agency. When in fact we have everything that we need inside of us.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious, as you sort of look at the sort of state of the world and where things are evolving, what are you personally calling in or like excited about as we build new worlds?
I think, and this is a bit related to the strength card. I think, as it really interesting, like as things get progressively harder, through no fault of our own, being able to see your capacity to love and care for yourself, to love and care for other people, to be engaged, to like view humanity as your friends and allies and not your enemies, like to just not fall into, hate and anger, even as like it feels like things are getting progressively worse. But I feel like as people get more and more taken away from them, I feel like I see people's capacity to be like, I just like, I want to be happy. I want to be able to be kind to people. I want, it's like, um, it's almost like the more things get sort of broken down, and this is why the fall of the empire can be good, because it's like the more that these things that aren't really giving us what we need anyway start to break, the more we realize that we don't need those things in order to be in community with people around us or to care for ourselves or to, it's like just to love ourselves doesn't require all this stuff that we thought it did. And so as we start to lose all of those things, it's like our inner strength can be growing, because you have no choice but to look inside to find those resources that are being taken away outside of you. Obviously not everyone is doing that, because there's obviously a lot of like reactive response as people feel unresourced. Some people are going to look inward and find resource, and some people are going to look outward and sort of blame others for why they're not feeling good.
Right.
But I feel like for myself and the people I surround myself with, I think there's a lot of people kind of discovering how to empower themselves without all this other stuff that we were told would empower us.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful vision. I think it's true.
Yeah. And it's like, and then it's like the future. I mean, not that I'm optimistic about the future, but if there's any optimism about the future, it's the fact that when people are feeling personally empowered just through the fact that they're like a human being living on Earth right now, it's like the more people feel empowered with that, the more positive can come out of that feeling.
Yeah, the more generous people can be too, I feel like. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah. No, it's good. It's almost like a challenge to ask people, like, what are we looking forward to right now? Because because there's got to be some stuff amidst it all. But thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciated just being able to talk to you about witchcraft and the frameworks around it, because I think, like you said, they are so important. And there's a lot of focus on like craft and practice, but not a lot on like the ethical frameworks of it and the history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I'm really excited. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do want to just mention as part of my witch credentials, but this is
Yes.
also, I think about this in an interesting way. I am related to a woman that was hanged in Salem
Oh wow.
for being a witch, Elizabeth Howe. However, there's no proof or anything. I don't know if she actually practiced witchcraft or if she was a victim of this misogyny and this, all the things we talked about why witches were prosecuted. So it's like this interesting thing where it's like I'm really proud of that connection. But at the same time, part of me is like, well, I know that that doesn't mean that she was necessarily practicing as a witch or had any sort of innate witchiness to her. She could have just been an unfortunate victim to this. But I like sort of things like that because it's something where it's sort of like, well, I'll never really know, and does it really matter? Because I think that's also like kind of a core thing with spirit and how we choose to interact with it is a lot of times we really want to know why or how or what is it, or we want all these answers that are kind of outside of what it can provide us with so much with us not knowing those answers.
Totally.
So I like that I have this like something that like connects me to a lineage that could somehow validate my own identity as a witch, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily validate it. But I think that kind of sums up the experience of being a witch, which is sort of like, you don't really have any proof of anything working aside from how you feel and how you're experiencing your life.
Right.
Which is not a tangible thing that you can kind of present other people and be like, here, look, like, it's just sort of like, here, look, like I feel this maybe slightly more at ease with living life than I did before I identified as a witch. Like,
Right.
like, I don't know what,
Or even like I feel magical. And like,
right.
how does one quantify that? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel like it's like there's so much having trust that what is for you is for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just like not having to like compare yourself to other people in the
Yeah.
process of that validation,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I love that connection though. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited because Rachel's going to be joining us at our magical marketplace this year at the Witches Confluence on November 2nd.
I'm super excited.
So come and hang out and come and enjoy some of Rachel's art, which is awesome. Yeah. What else do you have on the horizon? How can folks continue to support you in your work?
So I've been trying out some new ways of kind of getting my work out there, one of which is I have a Substack now that people can subscribe to, where I'm sort of taking my writing a little more seriously and connecting with people there. I'm also doing tarot and astrology and hypnosis sessions online or in person in LA. And yeah, my website is a really good resource, just smallspells.com for anything you might be interested in finding out about. And I have lots of, I'm going to have some brand new products at the market this fall.
Cool.
I'm very much looking forward to the market because, I said I'm not in a coven. I have a community of sort of witchy people in my life, but it's not very structured. And I'm really looking forward to this event because it's sort of like this congregation of like all of these little witchy friends, and just being together in one space always feels really amazing. So
it's gonna be so good. Yeah. I feel like part of this that I feel like we were like adjacently talking about is just like community, just like being in collaboration with people, like being in space with people. It's gonna be really nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we'll make sure to link all your stuff in our show notes. And yeah, thank you so much. This was really lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Let us know if you have questions. All right, take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Modern Witches podcast. We hope you've been inspired to cultivate your own magic and to craft your own spiritual practices. Let us know what sparked your curiosity by leaving us a comment on this episode or leave us a review. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. Your feedback and engagement truly fills our cups. If you're looking for more ways to gather with your fellow witches, please support our work on Patreon. Learn more at modernwitches.org. Blessed be.